There is a list in the first chapter of the New Testament that almost no one reads carefully. Most people skip it. 42 generations of names, one after another. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, on and on, all the way to Jesus. It reads like a legal document. It sounds like a census. And buried inside it, almost invisible, are 4 names that do not belong there. Not because they were sinners. Every man on that list was a sinner. They don't belong there because in the ancient world, women were not placed in genealogies. Not Jewish genealogies, not ever. This is not a list of the pure. This is not a list of the expected. This is not a list of women who stayed quiet and did what they were told. This is a list of women who changed everything, and the one who wrote it put them there on purpose. We will come back to those 4 names, but not yet. First, go back further, all the way to Egypt. Pharaoh is afraid. He is the most powerful man on earth, and he is afraid of babies, specifically Hebrew babies, because there are too many of them, and they are becoming a nation inside his nation, and that terrifies him. So he issues an order: kill every Hebrew boy at birth. 2 women received that order. Their names are Shiphrah and Puah. Midwives, the women called in when labor begins, when a mother is screaming and a child is coming, and everything is raw and terrifying and real. These 2 women stand at the edge of life and death every single day. And now Pharaoh is asking them to become instruments of death. They say no. That's it. No speech, no army, no miracle. Just 2 women who looked at a royal command and decided their God outranked the king of the Nile. The Bible says they feared God. In Hebrew, that phrase means they understood who the real authority was, and Pharaoh wasn't it. Because of Shiphrah and Puah, Hebrew boys live. One of them, decades later, will stand before another Pharaoh and say, "Let my people go." You don't get Moses without those 2 women. You don't get the Exodus. You don't get the 10 Commandments or the Promised Land or most of the Old Testament. Pay attention to this. Now, go to Canaan. A woman named Tamar is in crisis. She was married into the family of Judah, one of the 12 sons of Jacob. Her husband died. She married his brother, as the law required. He died too. And Judah, afraid a 3rd son would die if he married her, sent her away to live as a widow in her father's house. She was discarded, invisible. The law said she had rights. Judah refused to honor them. Tamar was not a woman who accepted injustice quietly. She disguised herself as a prostitute, sat by the road where Judah would pass, and used his own failure against him. When the truth came out, Judah, the patriarch, the one who should have known better, said 5 words that are still remarkable today. She is more righteous than I. Not, she tricked me. Not, she was wrong. She is more righteous than I. Tamar's son, born from that confrontation, is named Perez. His name is in the genealogy. His mother's name is in the genealogy. Judah is in the genealogy too. He is not the hero of this story. Here's what most people miss. The next woman in that same genealogy is a Canaanite, a prostitute from Jericho named Rahab. When Israel's spies arrived in her city, she hid them under stalks of flax on her roof, lied to the king's soldiers, and then made a deal with strangers who represented a God she had no reason to believe in. She said, and these are her exact words, "I know that the Lord has given you this land." Present tense. She didn't say, "I've heard you might be powerful." She said, "I know." She had more certainty about Israel's God than most of Israel had in the wilderness. Josephus, the Jewish historian, wrote about Rahab more than 1,000 years later and called her a woman of remarkable courage, a Canaanite woman, a prostitute, and she is in the line of Jesus. Directly after her, in lineage and in story, comes Ruth. Ruth is a Moabite, the wrong ethnicity, the wrong religion, the wrong country. Her husband dies, and her mother-in-law Naomi tells her to go home, go back to her own people, start over. Ruth refuses. She says something so fierce it sounds like a vow. Where you go, I will go. Where you die, I will die. That word in Hebrew, chesed, is the word the Bible uses for God's own covenant loyalty. Ruth is describing her love for Naomi using the same word that describes God's love for humanity. She was not an Israelite, and she understood God's love better than most of the people born into it. Ruth's great-grandson is King David. David's line, that bloodline of a Moabite widow who refused to let grief end her story, becomes the royal line of Israel, becomes the line that leads eventually to a stable in Bethlehem. And now the list is almost complete. There is one more name, the only one Matthew mentions without scandal attached to her, without a story of desperation or disguise. Just a teenage girl in a hill town, a girl who, by every measure of the ancient world, had no power, no status, no reason to matter. The angel comes, the room fills with light, and she is asked to carry something that would change the world. Not just her world, her body, her reputation, but the entire story of what God was doing since the beginning. She could have said no. She said, "Let it be to me according to your word." 6 words in English, a few syllables that hinge on a choice. And in that choice, quiet, in a one-room house, in the middle of the afternoon, history turns. Here is the thing about Mary that makes your breath catch. She knew what this would cost. She was engaged to Joseph. She knew what people would say. She knew that pregnancy before marriage in that culture was not just embarrassing, it could be lethal. And she said yes anyway. There is a mother somewhere right now. You may know her, you may be her, who chose to speak the hard thing when silence was safer, who chose to stay when leaving was easier, who said yes to something that cost her everything because she knew it was right. That is not a coincidence of character. That is the pattern God has been drawing since Shiphrah and Puah looked at Pharaoh's order and said no. Go back to that genealogy. 42 generations, mostly men. 4 women, Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and Bathsheba, inserted by Matthew into a list where women did not belong. Why? Because Matthew was writing to a Jewish audience that knew their own law, that knew their own customs, that would have stopped at each of those names and thought, wait, why is she there? Because she changed everything. That's why. This is not a story about exceptions. This is not a story about God tolerating broken women until better options came along. This is a story about God choosing exactly the people the world overlooked and using their courage, their grief, their refusal to disappear to build the most important story ever told. 3 things before you go. First, the women who changed the Bible were not changed by the Bible first. They acted before anyone told them it was allowed. Shiphrah and Puah acted on conscience. Tamar acted on justice. Rahab acted on faith she built from rumors. Ruth acted on love. Mary acted on trust. They didn't wait for permission. They moved. Second, the word in Genesis for the woman being a helper to man, Ezer, is the same word used for God when he is described as Israel's help. It was never a word for submission. It was a word for strength deployed in the right direction. Third, and this is the one I want you to sit with, every single one of these women was At some point, invisible, discarded, dismissed, not chosen, not seen. And God, the God who holds galaxies in place, noticed every single one of them, called each of them by name, built history on their choices. If you have ever felt like you were standing on the outside of the story, I want you to understand what the genealogy of Jesus is telling you. You are not outside the story. You never were. Which of these women hit you the hardest? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. If this opens something in you, subscribe. There are more stories where this came from. Stories about people the world forgot and a God who never did.